Okay, so good afternoon to one and all present here. And our next panel discussion for the day is going to revolve around design thinking and human centricity. So, as we all know, design thinking has grown beyond the confine of any individual person, organization, or website. And as it matures, its history deepens and its impact evolves. And talking about human centricity, it means focusing on something variously called sovereignty, self determination, self governance, autonomy, agency, or like in the terms of people involved with the generation of data. So, this session is going to be moderated by Mr. Manojit Sen. Sir is a senior HR professional and an enterprise business leader. Till December 2021, Sir was a board member of Shell International Shipping Services and the global head of HR for supply chain organization of Shell Lubricants, a US $10 billion business. Manojit sir joined Shell in India in 2000 after completing a master's in HR and working for 6 years in the FMCG industry. Of the 21 plus years in Shell, sir has spent the last 16 years in Singapore. And now, without any further ado, I would request sir to introduce our esteemed speakers for the session and take the session forward. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Kripa, and good afternoon for everyone who's in India. And I don't know whether it would be good morning or good evening for people joining in from other parts of the world. But it is a great pleasure to be with my very distinguished panelists, who I will introduce in just a second. And Kripa, you've done a great job of introducing the topic, but may I say a few more things just in order to kind of dwell a little bit upon why are we emphasizing on this topic. So, as you would all be aware, in the last couple of years, all of us have, around the world actually, have experienced life as we've never known it. Yeah, with a pandemic that clearly has ravaged countries, communities, organizations. And many organizations have indeed struggled to get a semblance of order and control back. And some have really successfully pivoted through that and redeveloped new business models in order to deliver value to their customers. What has emerged clearly is a new reality which leverages technology significantly and has transformed ways of working. Now, those that couldn't actually make that transition have also had to shut shop, unfortunately, as you would be aware. Now, the impact at a human level has been so severe that in many cases, people have actually started to ask the most fundamental of questions, particularly in terms of work and being, and have asked themselves, why am I even doing what I'm doing? And clearly, the transition that we've seen and aspects such as the great resignation that the US markets, Europe, and actually most parts of the world are experiencing to greater or lesser degree are telling us that this is not just a temporary question, not just a one time phenomena. This is now going to stick and is going to really have to shape the days and the future ahead. So, this fundamental shift is also in the consciousness of employees, and it is about the priorities that we each hold as workers, as employees of organizations, as leaders. And clearly, money is no longer the answer. The topic of today, therefore, assumes great significance because it is in this context that the insights that we've delved into and we will get some time to explore become particularly relevant, and they're more fundamental in nature than just a scratch on the surface superficially. So, with that said, let me then introduce this distinguished panel of my fellow colleagues here. Um, these are all people who are thought leaders, both in the areas of leadership as well as in terms of organizational transformation and certainly design thinking. So, let me first introduce to you Jin Kangmola. She's an award winning customer experience strategist and a designer with a proven track record of business success in financial services. Jin has led strategic customer experience initiatives for private banking, wealth management, and insurance businesses. She's simplified complex customer experiences, many of which we are still familiar with and are grappling with, and created a great bottom line impact. Jin has held several design leadership positions in OCBC Bank, one of the most successful and largest financial institutions in Singapore, and Credit Suisse in Switzerland. Jin has created a movement of sorts to distill methods and mindset for a human centered design across these organizations. She is the driver behind Frank by OCBC that many of you would have heard of if you've not experienced necessarily. And this was an award winning banking concept for millennials, which positioned OCBC Bank as the market leader in the segment. I was very impressed, Jin, with that piece of work, among many other things. Yeah.
Thank you.
With that said, I will also just add that Jin is also a highly acclaimed trainer and an affiliate faculty member in Singapore Management University, teaching executive programs on design thinking, customer experience, design leadership. And these have become some of the highest ranked programs, which is how I got to become a student of Jin. Yeah. So, as a recognized industry leader, Jin also speaks at world class executive education institutions like INSEAD, and Jin has successfully trained and coached over 1,000 executives across industries and countries. Jin is a keynote speaker in forums including TEDx and is also the Amazon Singapore bestseller of the book The Simplicity Playbook for Innovators, creating lovable experiences in a complicated world. I'd like you guys to give a virtual applause to Jin. Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Let me next introduce to you Dr. Sandhya Karpe. Sandhya is the CEO now of Imagine Education Design Studio, a leadership development advisory firm with global client portfolio. She's also the Human Capital Center leader, Asia, at the Conference Board, some of which we're all familiar with as HR professionals, and also the program director of Asia Learning Development and Center Development and Culture Council. Sandhya brings over 35 years of cross-cultural experience in human capital development, having worked consultatively with multinational and regional organizations, as well as business leaders across all 5 continents. Sandhya has been a mentor and a coach to business leaders, enabling them in successful career, role, and geographic transitions, which is how I got to get in touch with Sandhya. Earlier, Sandhya was the managing director at Duke Corporate Education in Singapore, and prior to this, she started up the Temasek Management Services Academy in Singapore as its founding head and chief enterprise learning officer, responsible for setting up and building the organization. Now, prior to TMS, Sandhya was with the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, US, as the head of the Custom Executive Education business and the member of its executive committee. Sandhya has led large professional services teams with overall P&L responsibility with the division's global portfolio. And her key contribution was the expansion of Wharton's business and footprint into key emerging markets, including India, China, APAC, and the Middle East. Sandhya has been an associate professor at NMIMS in Mumbai and is in the areas of organizational behavior and leadership. Sandhya was awarded the prestigious Chevening Gurukul Scholarship by the British government for study in the London School of Economics and Political Science. In recognition of her outstanding contribution to her profession, and Sandhya also holds an MBA from Queen's University, Canada, and a PhD from the Indian University of Technology, India, both with a focus on organizational behavior. Now, Sandhya had said, cut short my introduction, but there was very little from it that I could cut out, Sandhya. We're delighted to have you join us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, NHRDN and Manojit. Thanks a lot.
Wonderful. Thank you. And last but not the least is my dear friend and guru, Ellie. So Ellie, really a fantastic person, but by way of a professional introduction, I'd say a senior in entrepreneurship advisor and principal at Northern Star Innovation, specializing in entrepreneurship and organizational innovation. Ellie has over 12 years of experience in applying design thinking and innovation methodologies at global organizations such as EY, Merck, Intel, Hero Motors in India, Salesforce Innovation at Amdocs, and has over 25 years of international experience in a variety of business, marketing, and innovation roles. Currently, Ellie advises organizations on creating internal innovation via design thinking and other best practice methodologies. He works with both HR and L&D leaders to create sustainable innovation cultures and turn employee creativity into tangible organizational value. Ellie has also co-founded Onivati EduTech platform, which is used by top universities such as Columbia, MIT, Hong Kong University, and others. He also currently teaches online innovation diploma programs combining courses from MIT, Columbia, and Dartmouth universities, which is how I got to know Ellie. Ellie is passionate about the power of design thinking and innovation to clarify challenges, crystallize solutions, and create value. And I'm sure, Ellie, that word value has immense value for you. I mean, you've always been at it. You have an MBA cum laude in innovation from the Reichman University, as well as degrees in law and commerce from UNSW Australia. So, with that introduction, which I'm sure still doesn't do enough justice, I would say thank you, Ellie, for joining and making time. Now, this panel is, of course, joining from different geographies. Ellie is joining us from Sydney, and Jin is joining us from Switzerland. Sandhya is joining us from Australia. So, delighted that you could make the time at different times of your day and be with us. So, with no further ado, I know I have been speaking a lot and taking a lot of time. Let me turn over and actually pose the first question. That would be a common question for all the panel members. So, the question is, when you think of the challenge we're confronted with worldwide of people looking for meaning and purpose in their work, how do you see human centricity sculpting the emerging human capital agenda? And I would really be keen to hear perhaps an example or so as you illustrate or as you speak on this topic. So perhaps I'll start off with, well, anybody can take a shot at it. Who would like to go first?
I will defer to my colleagues here. So please feel free to. I just noticed that my video has gone off. I don't know if that's the same. If you can't see me either, but
yeah. So it's appearing as if you are frozen. We can still see you because that
okay.
screen. Yeah. So I think it should come back, Ellie. If you, we can hear you.
So. All right. Let's please go ahead, and that's I guess if I can be heard, that's it's halfway there. It's a good start. I'll try and fix the other one. All right.
All right. So, so within Jin and Sandhya, who wants to go first on this?
Well, it's a very difficult question to start with. Yeah. So, I mean, one of the observations I have made, you know, how human centricity is sculpting the emerging human capital agenda, is really the, you know, the whole COVID-19 pandemic gave us kind of a new lens to look at our values, isn't it, in terms of meaning, our lives. So I think the whole notion of work is changing. That it has a direct connection to how, you know, human resources professionals has to think about, you know, the human capital and how do we design the employee experiences and policies. So, I mean, also from my personal experience, and I also begin to see a lot, kind of a big increase in kind of assigning up the HR professionals in design thinking class, because I think HR is now in a very unique and interesting place where we really need to embrace the change of people thinking about the work very differently. You know, we used to be very keen on striking the balance between work and life. You know, work-life balance was a topic. So, you know, then we would come up with ways to make the work more interesting and so forth. But I think now the topic is, it's not anymore work-life balance, it's work-life integration. Because people are working from home, they begin to see a lot of possibilities of getting things done. Of course, we all miss going back to the office in some ways, but there are less need for having to go to the office. So I think this is a time where big empathy for the employees, like what does it really matter for them? You know, really embracing that their value isn't the same anymore. Their personal life is as important as the performance. So then how we as an HR, how we as an organization, you know, support that kind of you know, deep meaning for individuals. So empathy is one thing that I believe huge component of the human capital agenda. Another thing I see is the creativity. We have to design everything anew, right? In terms of the notion of office. Office is not anymore a place you go to work. You know, office should have now specific purpose. And also it comes with designing a new process, the work hour. the way we appraise the performance, the way we interact with each other. So every component of these human resources is changing. So creativity is needed more than ever for HR professionals. So I would think that creativity, empathy is the most important agenda I see at the moment in this time.
Thank you, Jin. And, it just resonates something that I heard from John Burson, one of the gurus in this field in HR, who spoke earlier today. And he said that the CEO's role becomes that of the chief empathy officer. And I
Oh,
thought that
I
was
love
very
that.
interesting.
Same me.
Absolutely, yeah. So
I love it. Yeah.
again, he said, look, I mean, we used to talk about innovation a lot, but innovation, in a sense, as much as it continues, is really coming up with the element of the need for creativity a lot more because of exactly the kind of reasons you mentioned. So thank you for reiterating some of the, I guess, the big changes that one is already seeing and will continue to see more of. Maybe I'll turn over to you, Sandhya, now for any comments.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, I agree with everything that Jin has said. So, Jin, you've taken away half my script. So, thank you. I agree with
First
everything.
advantage.
I just want to add a little bit here. And first of all, I think human centricity has become extremely integral to the whole strategy of organizations going forward. And I think what has happened, exactly as Jin said, is, during the pandemic, we've all hit pause and started to reflect on what really our life means for us. And this is not something that we used to do before, right? It was all about work, but now life is more than work, and it's much, much more than work. And I think that is something that organizations really need to embrace and to acknowledge and to accept, and then begin to take accountability for providing a more holistic approach to employee engagement. And people are now, the lines between life and work have become extremely blurred. In fact, they are non-existent, and therefore work is coming into the home and home is coming to work. So this really means that employees are being much more authentic. They are expecting the employers to accept them as whole people and not just as employees who are hunched behind a desk or a computer. And that is presenting a whole different, I would say, opportunity, but also a challenge, because that is really not the way we've engaged with employees in the past. But I think what's important to understand, it's no longer a nice to have. It's not just about being nice. It's not just about showing empathy for the sake of empathy, but it is a business imperative, because it affects productivity, it affects employee engagement, it is even affecting retention. So Manojit, you referred to the Great Resignation, and this is of course US data. We don't have as much data for Asia at this point, but the latest figures from the US: 4.5 million people quit the workforce in November 2021. That is a huge number, and many of them without jobs in hand. So this is really telling that people are actually voting with their feet, which means they're walking if they don't find that the organization is really embracing them as whole people and providing them with that opportunity to find meaning and to realize their purpose. I think the other very important shift that we are seeing is also a shift from a focus on corporate purpose to individual purpose. Purpose has been in the conversation for quite some time now, but it was all about, what does the company stand for? What do they do? How do they engage with the society, with the community? Are they sustainable? Are they ethical, and all of that? But now it's becoming much more about individual purpose. And that means, what do I want from my workplace? What do I want from my employer? And that is a big challenge, because everybody wants something different. And so one size is not going to fit all. And there will need to be a very concerted effort to really understand what people want, what motivates them, what inspires them, and curate, solutions to respond. So I know we have many other things to talk about, but I'll just end by saying, I'm really impressed by the amazing experiments that this community, the human capital community, is driving. I think this is the era of HR. We had the 2008 crisis where the finance folks, were in charge at the driver's seat. I think this is the opportunity for the HR, the human capital community, to demonstrate value, to rise, to shine, and to show what metal they're made of, because they're expected to be strategic partners to the business. And I am seeing some really brilliant experiments coming through. People are testing and learning, and they're really driving a lot of change and treading very uncharted waters. So kudos to all of you on this call who represent this wonderful community that is powering through this crisis. So I'll stop there, Manojit, and let you ask
Thank you.
Ellie.
Thank you, Sandhya. And really, I mean, such a great set of points there. And again, it echoes something that I heard John talk about this morning, which is about the move from conformity to individuality. And I think in the different examples of whether it is from moving from just corporate purpose to individual purpose, or it is the individual asserting their own need to work in a certain area in a certain way or not, everywhere we are seeing, and indeed it is a challenge because till now we've designed processes, systems, everything for everyone, and never really bothered about catering to the individual. So I think it is such an important shift that I think poses a new set of challenges. So Ellie, I'm hoping you will get us the right solutions now, though I dare say that we don't see you on video yet, but we can hear you though.
Yes, I don't know what happened there. I'm trying to get the video back, but I think for the sake of time, we will just continue and maybe I'll put my face up so at least you can see the photo,
Yes,
and that will
sure.
remind you of what I look like when I had more hair. So very quickly, I think what's been said by my fellow panelist members is of extreme importance, and I don't want to repeat any of that. I just want to take it maybe down to an implementation level, from a strategic level, because I think strategically everything that's been said here has been absolutely spot on. I think from an implementation level, my main comment would be what we have seen in the last couple of years has shown us very clearly, in a very obvious way, that employee needs and wants and pain points are not static. They're not constant. They're dynamic. They change over time. It actually shouldn't require a global pandemic for us to understand that. That should be something that you don't operate with an IT platform from the 1970s when you're in 2021. And yet I can tell you from my experience, training and consulting on design thinking to various organizations, and of course I will give the names of the successful ones. I won't shame in any ones, but I can tell you that there's often a lot of resistance, especially from HR personnel who have been in those organizations for a very long time, to change. So change management is a really important part, and it's a really important part just to understand that you got to have your finger on the pulse the entire time. You can't just do a design thinking sprint to try and understand the needs of your employees. By the way, you need to do that, but you can't just do that and then forget about it for the next 5-10 years, because 6 months from now, new needs will arise. So you need to be constantly up to date on needs, pain points, and motivations, and make sure that you have people who are trained and who have in their schedules. It's scheduled that they will do a design thinking sprint with challenges, and there's a schedule for identifying challenges. So a lot of it comes back to planning and to implementation. And strategy is wonderful, but you need to implement it on the ground at a technical level, and that's what I see a lot in my consulting work is unfortunately missed by many organizations.
Thank you, Ellie. And absolutely, because I think often at times we can have very many lofty ideas and very high flown strategies which look wonderfully on paper, and yet the reality doesn't, change for people. And when, of course, people have suffered a lot of that, they decide to, as it were, vote with their feet, as Sandhya said. So they walk out to places where the experience, the real lived experience, is a lot more responsive, let's say, to employee needs. So I think you highlight a very important point that as much as we need to take cognizance of everything that's changing and devise these right strategies going forward, we cannot lose sight of how well we are implementing things. So let's keep that conversation around the effectiveness both of the strategy and the implementation as we go forward into the conversation. So thank you all for these opening comments. I think it's a good idea for us to do a quick poll at this stage. So Kripa, if I may ask your help to just pose for us the first question, because I'm also seeing some questions coming up, which I think trigger me to ask if people are really familiar with design thinking. And while I won't be able to really get everybody to comment, it would be helpful to understand how many people would say yes emphatically, how many people would say a little bit yes, and some others, and don't feel hesitant to say not really as well. Because as I've shared with you, there are at least two people here, well, actually three people here who teach, and two people who are faculty on design thinking at eminent institutions. So they would be more than happy to take a couple of minutes to just share with you what design thinking is and where it can be applied. So Kripa, if we may have the first poll question, please.
Yes, sir. Coming right away.
It would perhaps give us a quick baseline. So if you could quickly, in 30 seconds, folks, give us a sense of where you are. It's anonymous, of course, so we won't be ratting you out if you said, no, I don't know anything. Okay, we should try and wrap up then, I guess. Have we got most people responding, Kripa?
Yes, sir. People are responding.
Okay. You're the one who probably has visibility of how many people are actually responding. So tell me when we can close the poll and see how it looks.
Yes, sir. Sure.
Thank you.
I think we can close the poll now.
Perfect. Let's do that and let's see what it tells us. Okay. So what we're seeing is at least half of the people are basically saying, yeah, we do understand a little bit about design thinking. We've heard about it. And I think almost equal amounts or equal percentages are saying yes and not really. So I don't know whether any one of, whether it's Jin or Ellie, if you guys would like to give your favorite one line on design thinking. What is design thinking?
I am happy to
Please.
take this one, even though I am a disembodied father at the moment. Design thinking to me is both a best practice process, a guide map that ensures that when you are innovating, you're not having to invent the wheel for your actions, but instead you are provided with both a process map that is iterative, and that's really very important about design thinking. It's not a straight line journey, it's a journey of continuous validation, and that's something, by the way, that also managers need to remember. If a team goes back because they've invalidated an assumption, that's not a mistake. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. You don't want to go straight with your head against the wall. So very quickly, just to finish up. So on the one hand, it's a best practice process, and on the other hand, it's a collection of best practice tools and methodologies, often giving the opportunity for design thinking leaders and professionals to choose the best tools at different phases of this iterative process. So in summary, it's a best practice process and best practice methodologies.
Thank you.
Putting last point, putting of course the human and the user at the center. That's a crucial thing that I don't know why I left out, but it's super important to mention that all of this process is totally irrelevant unless you come with the right approach and philosophy that you are making this user-centric or actually stakeholder-centric. And that's something I'd like to talk about later, because we get caught up on it being customer journey maps and user processes, but very often it's about stakeholders, and it applies to much more than just customers, like employees, for example. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Manon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna add this, the human centricity part. So for me, I personally prefer the word human-centered design, because it already explains what it is. It's a process that allows us to start from human, seeing human as a source of inspiration, whether that human being is customers or employees, stakeholders, right? So human-centered design for me is a better description of design thinking. And one more component I believe is important is the outcome of design thinking is improving a new experience, so delivering a new, enhanced human experience. So that would be my definition.
Thank you very much. And indeed, I think I wouldn't want to add anything more to that. You've
We
both of you.
already, I think,
Yeah, you've done a great job. I'm just thinking, Sandhya, there are a couple of questions on the Q&A piece. I don't know whether you want to make a very quick comment on any of those. One is, how effective is design thinking in HR function? What challenges do you come across if you have to implement? Any quick comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the big challenge is, we all as HR professionals need to get up to speed with the whole concept of design thinking. And as Ellie
Yes.
and Jin rightly said, the paradigm in the past is this is about customers, right? And we
Yeah.
have been facilitating, our colleagues in marketing and sales to be more customer centric. But I think the whole idea of it being applied to to employees is a novel one for our community. And so I think, first of all, just understanding the basics of what it is. And I think both my fellow panelists have explained this very beautifully, that it's in very simple terms, thinking about the user and creating an experience that the user would find inspiring or compelling or motivating. So absolutely, I think this is new, but it's absolutely required, because we are moving into a scenario where, as I said before, managers and leaders will need to curate very specific, individual, personalized responses and solutions. And that is going to require a very human-centric approach, and really understanding what that specific employee or that group or that segment needs, and then coming back with what makes the most sense. So there is a big opportunity for us to apply the principles of design thinking. And I also want to reiterate what Ellie said, is the pain points are moving, they are shifting. So this is also about constantly being in touch. And I know companies are doing an amazing job of launching pulse surveys, for example, to get a quick check on where employees are at when they launch any new process, whether it's work from home or something else. How are people actually reacting to it, and then having that agility and that open-mindedness to shift gears and say, hey, this isn't working, let's try something else. And that brings us to the whole thing of, how do you deal with mistakes that you make, right? And that's a bigger discussion that we can talk about later. But absolutely, I think human capital community does need to get up to speed with this. And if you're not using it already, I think the time to start is now.
Thank you, Sandhya. And indeed, just to reiterate that, in a very contrived way, funnily enough, design thinking approaches are actually bringing back the human element into HR. For a while now, in many organizations, we in HR would be hearing, where is the human part of the HR gone? You guys have become so processy and so bureaucratic, etc. And I wouldn't overgeneralize and say that's true to be for all organizations, but we've all had experiences of these kinds of organizations where, the HR piece, the human, the element of empathy, the element of even trying to understand the human being was getting lost. And I think design thinking has pointed out, and that's why it's in a contrived way, because it started with appreciating what the customer needs in order to keep the business going, till you realize that if I don't have the employees, there will be no business. So in a way, you need to now kind of understand the needs of the employees. But I'm so happy that it's bringing back, because that has personally been my ethos all the while, as an HR professional, that I do want to be able to be there for the employees and their well-being. So with that said, I guess I'll just make a quick comment on the two other questions I can see. What are the HR functions where design thinking can be more effective, and is it applicable in rewards? I would absolutely generalize at the risk of overgeneralization and say in every aspect of HR, design thinking would be applicable to greater or lesser degree. Because if it's rewards as an example, where do you start if you don't even know what it is that the employee is looking for? Which are the rewards programs that really make most sense? If you're coming at it from an ivory tower and thinking, I know best, that is surely the sign of really not being able to respond to what the real needs of the employee are. So I think design thinking, in a sense, teaches us to be able to design products, processes, everything, keeping the stakeholder, the customer, the employee in mind. Yeah. So with that, and perhaps we'll come back to more. Let me then ask whether it's Kripa or Kripa perhaps to help us with our second question. And again, for everyone, do you think your organization has human-centric processes and policies? And again, it's just for us to kind of collectively get a sense. Yeah.
So I'll publish the second poll, sir.
Yes, please. We aren't yet seeing it, Kripa. Yeah.
So the attendees are responding to it. After I
Oh,
close the poll, I'll show the results on the
okay.
stage.
Fair enough. Okay, great. And as people are responding, please don't hesitate, because Kripa has assured me she's not taking notes of the people who are saying, no, my organization is not employee centric or, human centric.
I think an interesting question that correlates with that, Manojit, is does your organization have a dedicated innovation manager who takes responsibility and control for that? And we can talk about that later. But often there's a clear correlation when there is no responsible party, when that role is given to someone as a secondary role. I've seen that happen so many times in organizations. Then there is no one to take responsibility and drive design thinking. By the way, design thinking is a very important methodology and tool. It's just one of a number of innovation methodologies and tools. So that would be an interesting aspect to check as well, that kind of correlation.
Totally. And I can see people saying, agreeing with you, with a lot of thumbs up coming your way. So Kripa, if we have the results, could you show us what it looks like?
So we have it here on stage.
Okay, so I think, wow, that is very interesting. So almost 50% think that they do have human-centric processes and policies. And really, I'm so heartened to hear this, because I'm sure this is an honest reflection of what you see as the reality. I'm sure that if I did perhaps ask you, those of you who've said 50%, as to how much has happened in the last year and a bit because of, I'm almost certain many of you would say that, yes, we have indeed pivoted a fair bit in the last year and a bit. And those of you who are perhaps on the 34% might be wondering, gee, I mean, maybe genuinely seeing that, okay, your organizations are not doing enough, or perhaps just also being quite, you're probably setting yourselves high standards. So not a bad position to be in. I think at the end of the day, we are all on a journey on this. We're all learning from each other. Partly, I guess, the objective of a session like this, to reignite our passions and an understanding of the topic. So thank you for that. Kripa, I think it's a good idea to go for our third question right at the as a stretch. And this is not a trick question. Huh? So the question is, do you see having human-centric processes and policies being at the expense of business value? Yeah? Do you believe, maybe another way of phrasing it would be, do you believe that human-centric processes and policies are always at the expense of business and business outcomes? Yeah? Not a trick question. I just genuinely want to understand where your heads are on this. Your experience tells you what you've heard being said.
It's a problem now, because I anything that I say in terms of my opinion, I feel may sway people's people's answers. So I can't really discuss my thoughts at this point while people are answering.
Not at the moment. Yours is like, when there is a jury going on, and basically the ones who are on either side of the debate are not expected to comment. So like
Exactly.
that, Ellie, you'll have to hold your view for just a couple more minutes.
That's what I'm doing, holding the horses.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's see what it says, Kripa.
So we still have the votes coming in. It's a live poll.
Fantastic. Somebody has commented that they can't see the question on the screen. I don't know whether it's visible to. We can see it. So Deepak, if you're hearing, we can see it. All right. Perhaps a good idea to close it now in the interest of time, Kripa.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Oh, I'm not getting my full screen as well because the percentages aren't adding up. So, in fact, is it possible to scroll up a tiny bit, Kripa? Because it seems there is at least one tab which is not appearing on my end, at least.
Okay.
I can see a 17.65 and a 29.41. That should give us the difference for the third.
You can scroll it down. I had the same issue. You can actually scroll down that screen, Manojit, and that makes the not really visible at 52.94%.
Okay. So, okay, I'm still trying to figure out how to scroll down on it. But what I can see, of course, is that there is a big percentage which basically says no, really, which is great because you are seeing that there is indeed no conflict between business value and applying a human-centered approach. But there is at least an 18% here who are saying there is a conflict. And I think it would be helpful both to be able to get some perspectives. We won't be able to open up the mics as of now, and also in the interest of time, we'll keep moving. But please don't hesitate to put in your comments on chat. It would be really interesting to understand where people may be coming from when you say at times or yes, that there is a real challenge. And I say this in the context of the reality we are living in today and increasingly stepping into. Yeah. With that, and keeping these responses in mind, may I move us to the second part of our conversation and start with asking a few questions. So, Jin, if I may ask you that as a business leader and as someone who has seen the need for bringing, customer centricity to organizations, how do you see the need for human centricity in organizations as things stand today?
Right. So to be really honest, like me as a customer experience designer, more than 90% of my time has been spent improving customer experience. So because I started my journey after post-global financial crisis where customer centricity had to become real, and the digital banking was disrupting the industry, the notion of financial services. So we really had to bring this customer centricity into the organization, and that's what I've been doing. And to be honest, whenever our HR colleagues were saying, "Hey, we really need to improve our intranet," then say, "Sorry, our resources are prioritized for the customer touch points." So there has been many occasions where we had to prioritize all our team's resources for the customer experience, improving customer experience. But then now I think there's, again, two big shifts. One is after about 7 years of my journey with OCBC Bank, I was called in by our CEO who was asking, "Hey, what you guys are doing is great, but one department doing all this customer centricity thing isn't enough because the environment is changing so fast. So it'll be too slow that people have to come to you in order to do the research, map journey, and synthesize and everything. So can you scale this way of thinking across the organization?" So I think we are in a place where moving away from innovation-centered thinking to this become like everybody's skill set, just like everybody need to have good communication skills, interpersonal skills. Maybe design thinking become one of those core skills at our organizational level. So that's one of the big shifts. Another shift I saw, the need for human centricity in the organization, which happened to be one of my aha moment in my time with OCBC. I think it was in 2019. I was sitting with head of HR, and then he genuinely had this question: is there a possibility that all the things we do? I mean, we've been doing a great job in really improving our customer experience, really bringing this thinking and really equipping our entire HR team to be able to design the employee experience to the level that we did for the customer experience, because he begins to see as a key differentiator in attracting talent, also in retaining talent. So I don't know, suddenly after that conversation, I felt like, we've been doing this like almost 10 years, and finally we are at the epicenter of where source of innovation is. I mean, I still believe customer centricity is important, because when we observe and spend time with customers, that's where source of inspiration comes. But at the same time, I think I personally have been ignoring the importance of delivering the best possible employee experience being the source of innovation. So yeah, I think really seeing the employees as source of innovation has been like my aha moment. And I felt like we kind of, like pick the jackpot. This is the place where we really have to looking at the differentiator and source of innovation. So, and now, I'm really excited to meet all these HR professionals who's really keen to bring design thinking in the way they design the processes, forms, policies, and all that. And I totally agree with Ali that all the thinking of design thinking, human-centered design is noble, but there are a lot of challenges in executing. One of the challenge I see is the skill set gap.
So, if I may, Jin,
Yeah.
I want to come to that point. So I'm just going to interrupt for a second, and
Yeah.
and before we get there, ask a few other questions. But I'm also going to just reiterate something I heard again from Josh this morning, which is what he sees of HR as, and he called it the future of HR is that of designers, and of designers, of being consultants, and of service delivery professionals, not just one who's basically sitting out and administering processes anymore. So he was very deliberate in the use of the word design, and I think he used it quite a number of other times. So I just wanted to reiterate that. Do please hold that thought around the challenges. We will come to it, but I didn't want
Great.
to. Yeah, I wanted to first go with Sandhya and ask Sandhya that, given that you've been in touch with leaders of many organizations across Asia and globally, and you've been advising them on their human capital agenda, do you see them taking a human centric view in the decisions, such as, for example, working from home? Or are people saying, okay, we can't wait for this day to get over and I just yank people back into offices, as it were? What are you seeing and hearing?
Yeah, Manojit, absolutely. I think organizations are beginning to appreciate that the genie is out of the bottle, in the sense that employees are now, are loving the flexibility, the autonomy that this new model offers. There is a big shift from FOMO, which is the fear of missing out of what happened in the office, to JOMO, which is the joy of missing out. And people are
Okay.
no longer looking forward to those, grueling commutes and some unproductive time that we spend in the office, right? We all know that. I mean, while there are a lot of good things that happen, this water cooler conversations. So I think employees are really loving the fact that they're able to reclaim some time for their personal lives, for other priorities beyond work. And I think employers are beginning to realize that. So from an engagement productivity perspective, to your earlier question about business value, it is absolutely a strong business case for human-centered design in organizations. It's not a nice to have. It's just not just being nice to people. So there are a lot of companies that are moving towards the world of hybrid work, but each one is defining that in a very, very different way. The boldest experiment that I've seen so far is from from 3M, and I don't know if there's anybody from 3M on this call today, on this meeting today, but they have launched a program just recently called Work Your Way, where employees are allowed to pick the time, the place, and also how they want to deliver on their outcomes, and their deliverables. So this to me is a very, very, it is probably the most extreme that I have seen in terms of design thinking in the work from home model and how it's being implemented. But by 3M's own admission, this is a whole new space for them as well. And they are in the test and learn mode themselves. And they are experimenting and they are going to see how this works and constantly be in touch with their employees. And I know many other companies are looking at, the 3+2 model and all of that, right? But this company has really gone to the fullest, and said, let's just give the employee a blank sheet of paper and let's define what the deliverables are, what the performance outcomes are, and then let's give our employees the power to choose how they will achieve this. Now, there are a lot of other things that need to happen to get this right, which I know, Manojit, you're going to talk about a little later. But yeah, so there's some really great work that's happening. But I must say that the jury is still out in terms of what's going to work and what isn't. And we are just going to be watching this space very keenly.
Thank you, Sandhya. And I think what I'm seeing as well is that there is a lot more appetite for experimentation, from learning, trialing, pivoting, and if things don't work, for people to say, yeah, that didn't work as well as we thought, but we learned something from it. So at least that is a positive shift that I'm beginning to see across organizations. Now, Ellie, coming to, I guess, aspects of implementation. Now, design thinking has been around for a fair bit of time, and you've worked across the world in organizations and supported transitions. Have you seen organizations successfully adopt design thinking and human-centered approaches? And any examples or anything that you've seen and observed working particularly well, or perhaps not?
Great. No, great question. Great question. Thank you. So, yes, I have. I can. And I said I will not shame any of the organizations that I do not believe are succeeding. I can just give industries and etc. But I can definitely name organizations that I have seen do phenomenal work and actually incorporate design thinking as a must-have knowledge center of excellence in their companies. And again, this is just a few examples. There are more, but SAP, sometimes known as SAP, is an international leader. I'm sure anyone who's worked with SAP or has a chance to speak to them, they actually have design thinking labs. They have put a lot of work into, and they've put their money where their mouth is. They've actually invested, and that's something I want to quickly speak about as well. Maybe I can divert just very, very briefly. For design thinking to be successful in organizations on an implementation level, a number of things have to happen. Senior management and those responsible for budgets must understand that the budget in design thinking should not be for the easy to achieve, what we call innovation theater. It's not about having an innovation challenge or running an innovation hackathon. It's about actually implementing design thinking. And here's the crunch. Because design thinking has for so long been looking at giving examples, if anyone is learning design thinking, the examples you will get are predominantly about customers and users. They're not about employees. And there's been even the language of design thinking, such as customer journey mapping. It's not customer journey mapping. Sure, it's used to map customer journeys, but it's equally applicable. When I teach it, the first thing I tell my students, I prefer you call it stakeholder journey mapping, because the same tool is equally applicable to employees, to partners, suppliers. And here's the crunch. When managers, especially senior managers, who do not have first-hand experience with design thinking, have not gone through the process when they come to make decisions, because they haven't themselves been involved in the process at a ground level, at the level of the soldier. They're at the level of the general, not at the level of a low-ranking officer or a soldier. They often do not appreciate the complexities, and they don't understand that design thinking has limitations, but it also has potentialities that are not being implemented. And just making that switch to understand that you can use design thinking beyond external customers. You can use it with internal customers, and you should use it with internal customers, with suppliers, with government and regulators, basically with all the major stakeholders. I can tell you it only happens very rarely, and it happens when the challenge that the design thinking sprint is trying to solve is already focused on an employee. When the challenge is focused on how to solve an employee-based problem, of course, the employee will be the first stakeholder, and all the rest will be subsidiary, secondary, and tertiary stakeholders. But when the challenge is based on the customer, I can give you a very quick example. I did some work about 7 years ago with a major cell, one of the leading cell operators in Southeast Asia. I'm not going to say their names. By the way, they have improved tremendously over those 7 years, because I keep in touch with people there. And the challenge that we were facing was how to increase the sales to the business segment of users. Because of limited budget, because of insufficient understanding by senior decision makers, the only stakeholder to which empathy, and this was done predominantly through interviews and observations, was applied were the customers. They did not apply the same methodologies to the most crucial stakeholder, the salespeople. What are the salespeople going through? What are their issues? What are their problems? And so I think if we can ensure that senior managers and HR managers all have first-hand experience, not just textbook experience, but first-hand experience, that they take a few steps down from their role and join a team as a soldier, as a maybe soldier is the wrong word, but as a ground level, especially now with what's happening politically in the world. But as a non-manager, as a team player, and experience things and put the ego to the side and come down to the level, maybe 1, 2, 3 levels below your current managerial level, they would learn so much. They would experience so much. In fact, we see it with Undercover Boss. Undercover Boss is a great example of how to achieve empathy.
Totally.
I don't know if you have that in your countries, but it's
Yeah.
where senior managers go and pretend to be low-level workers. I think that's fantastic. That kind of empathy, obviously, is just an example, but it starts with understanding, and understanding starts with empathy, and understanding that chances are, and I will finish on this sentence, chances are that you have more unknown unknowns than known knowns. If people can take that humility, and no matter how senior they are, understand that there is an entire world out there that they don't know, and they may actually be disconnected from customers, internal customers, employees, and other stakeholders. If we can help them make that switch, we can achieve so much more. And I obviously have a lot more to say about that. I will say one last thing: do not provide design thinking training just to your senior managers or just to your managers. Look at it throughout the entire company. It should be a skill that junior people have, and juniors have a lot to contribute, much more so than people think.
Absolutely, Ellie. I mean, so many points that I totally resonate with. I mean, we are in a world which is a lot more egalitarian than perhaps when you and I started working. Today, hierarchy and many of those other concepts of the past really don't hold that much relevance anymore. Sure, there is a need for direction. Sure, there is a need for leadership. But the form of leadership that can work in today's world is one which is of humility, which is one of curiosity, which is one of really trying to deeply understand before trying to be understood. Otherwise, your dictum has very little relevance and you won't have followers, even if you have people nodding away. So I can see
Absolutely.
that Jin was nodding away and saying, yeah, and I want to come in on the challenges. So with that, Jin, may I ask you, I mean, based on a few of the points that Ellie was talking and the challenges that you see, what in your experience are some of the things that can be tried to make leaders more aware and get involved?
Yeah, I mean, I can't agree more with that first-hand experience which Ellie mentioned, right? I mean, design thinking has to be experienced, right? So really having some sort of program, or really, finding a biggest employee's pain point and then fix it from there. Although, I mean, to be honest, I don't have a lot of experience in improving employee experience because I've been focusing on customer experience. But even from that, we had to take some sort of baby steps. So the way organizations see the value of design thinking, not because it's good to be nice, good to be humane and all that, they need to see the value. Why are we doing this? It's not necessarily easy or straightforward. Also, it could require some sort of investment for the organization in terms of training people or setting up new departments so that they can really drive that journey, right? So one of the things I learned in that journey is we need to show the value along the way. So the journey can start something really small. I've been changing a lot of forms, back in the days. Take the most painful form that our customers have, and then we improve it based on their feedback and all that. And we realized that it's just not a form. The form is a reflection of a process. The reason why it's complex is because the process behind has been complex. And also because people don't take it serious. Form doesn't have to look pretty. It's just a form, right? Whereas every touch point conveys the intention and meaning and all that. So once we improved it, and then we measure it. So previous form generated more than 20% of error in form filling, whereas a new form, less than 0.something%. And then we gain the trust, and then we do a lot of storytelling. And that's how people begin to be curious about design thinking, and they want to do more. And then we gain confidence, and then we will move to the bigger project. So I think from implementation point of view, I mean, start implementing design thinking in HR. It doesn't have to be something really big cultural program per se. I think having something, pick something. I like the idea of really changing something visible. It can be a form. It can be the way we design the intranet or app, the employee onboarding process, something that we can tangibly change and then learn from it and see the before and after and make fans and friends about design thinking. I love the idea of starting with a suction rather than imposing certain process on them. So really showing that impact and grow from there is one of the things I think it was very, very powerful. Another thing that the challenges I see is I think I briefly mentioned it, is the gap in skill set. So a lot of design thinking tools it is learnable, hence there are a lot of design thinking courses. But one of the skill set gap I see in the market is being able to translate the empathy into insight. So we call it synthesis. So even though you map employee journey mapping and you interview people, but then the way we bring all this tested data together, this is not something that anybody can do. It's a little bit different from analyzing just a pattern. This is a process where human empathy, intuition, and the logic and the feasibility budget, everything comes in. So I think those skill set has to be acknowledged. This is what we need in order to really translate so-called empathy, really importance of empathy, into a tangible action. So that gap is one thing I see in terms of skill set. Although there are a lot of journey mapping, but then people cannot really make sense out of it. Another skill set I do think we need more and more is the actual design skill set. So the design thinking, because it's a methodology, a lot of people approach it as a process. But actually design is also a craft. It is, like materializing it into the way it looks and feel, copywriting, the colors, everything, it matters. So I feel because of popularity of design thinking as a process, that craft side of design has been kind of ignored. So I remember from the poll that a lot of people in this conference believe that we as an organization, we have a good intent, right? We have a human-centric policies and processes, but maybe employees may not feel that way because it's not translated on the form, on the intranet, on the, so there might be a gap between the intention of the business and the actual experience of the employee. So these are the gaps that I would suggest that we really look at. Do we have the kind of capabilities within HR so that we can really close those gaps to really bring the real power of design thinking into the organization?
Very great points, Jin. And I was just noticing that for an audience like this, I think it would be very important to, I think, start to acknowledge some of these skills that we can develop in ourselves. And I think a few of them, between Ellie and yourself, you mentioned one of really being able to do good stakeholder journey mapping, storytelling, the one of being able to really do synthesis from empathy to insights, and really beginning to get the craft of the design. It's not just the process of design, but really the craft. And John earlier used the word that HR is more a craft than just a science of which you go through step by step. So thank you for that. I know we are very quickly running out of time, but because it's a fantastic conversation, and I don't want to, kind of leave it at this, I will now turn, I guess, Sandhya, to you, perhaps to check, from a culture change perspective that organizations need to go through. We've heard a little bit about the imperative for organizations, the demands on leaders to step up, the need for HR leaders to be able to develop skills in the organizations. What would you say from a culture change perspective that needs to happen to make customer centricity come alive?
I think that is huge. That is really, really huge, because what I'm observing is that the processes and the systems are being put in place at a very fast pace, but the shift in culture and mindsets has needs to really keep pace in order for this whole thing to work, right? And this really brings us to the craft part of design thinking. So you might have a great process, but if the software is not in place to really support it in a way that is necessary, this could really break down. So just a couple of things that I want to mention here is, first of all, your leaders need to walk the talk. We have found that this works much better when there is senior leader championship. And so my recommendation would be, if it is just HR, it is an HR initiative. It's like pushing a boulder up a hill, right? So you really need to find allies in the top management, and you may not find all of them, get all of them on your side. So I wouldn't suggest boiling the ocean here, but pick a couple of people who have the propensity to get on board, work on them one on one, and really get them behind you. And that's where visible reinforcement of that empathy, that humility, that need to understand employees, putting some budgets and investment behind this is what you need your senior leadership support for. So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is, the culture shift, right? For example, Asia, we have a whole presenteeism bias. So while we talk about work from home, which is what the employees want, many of them want that flexibility. Are you, as leaders and managers, willing to let go of control and let go of that bias of not needing to see your employees visibly to believe that they're working? We are hearing that there's a lot of trust issues that are developing in this new world of hybrid work, and tensions between bosses and direct reports, where bosses, sometimes with a legacy mindset, are not really willing to embrace this whole new reality that people could actually be productive and more productive working from home. So, just sort of that, letting go of those controls. I mean, these are some of the tough ones, right, that we tackle. So trust. The other thing I would say is empowering your middle managers to craft solutions that make sense, because we are not in that age anymore where we can say, hey, there's no precedent for this, so don't ask me for this because I can't provide it. But it is about sticking your neck out for people and crafting something bespoke and unique which makes sense for that individual. And that doesn't need to be run up the flagpole every time. So you do need to push that power down the line to managers, team leaders, to say, you know what, if you get a request and that is unusual, it's not in the blueprint, as long as it's not going to blow up the company and it's not going to kill us financially, you should be able to feel empowered to offer that concession. Now, of course, the flip side of that is when you get into personalization, there are issues of equity and issues of, how do you administer this, right, without feeling that
Yeah.
there is favoritism and all of that. So those are, whoever said leadership was easy, right? It's not for the faint hearted. It's a complex territory. So all the challenges that I've just mentioned come with that wonderful opportunity to make a difference to people. So yes, there's a lot of work to be done on the culture side, and I would highly recommend that you step on the gas on culture mindset shifts, in parallel with your processes and systems, so that you get the whole impact of what you're trying to achieve.
That's
Very,
wonderful. If I manage it, may I
please,
add a few words to that, please? I just
please.
it's triggered so many things, and I wish we had more time as a panel to discuss this, because Sandhya raised such important points. I want to say, just add to that and build up on that. Absolutely, C-level support is crucial. I can tell you that being head of internal innovation, leading internal innovation at a multinational corporation, for a period of about 6 years, I was reporting to a different VP innovation every year, because every year a new VP innovation was hired and then ceremoniously fired, because C-level management did not understand that that you cannot expect entrepreneurship, which again is my specialty, to lead you results within 6 months. An internal startup isn't going to give you the ROI of a division that's been in existence for 5 years. You're going to have to look at other KPIs, and measurements and matrix is just becoming so important, and ever more important. I want to commend one company that I had the opportunity to work with in India. We mentioned Hero Motors. Hero Motors created a fantastic initiative in late 2018 called Hero Hatch. I don't know if any of you heard about it, but they took 12 engineers. Unfortunately, it was 11 men and only one woman, and that's a point. I think that's a totally different discussion, but I think diversity still has a way to go in how we apply innovation, and we can learn a lot from that using design thinking. But they took that group, removed them from the hero environment, placed them in a WeWork environment. This was in Gurgaon in India, if anyone has been there or is familiar with that. And I can tell you that was fantastic. For 6 weeks, we worked on creating a human-centered, customer-centered, partner-centered solutions. And I'm very proud to say 2 of those pitch solutions were green-lighted and actually became are now independent daughter companies for Hero Motors. So that's the point. And the second point I quickly like to add is HR, as good as it may be, as well trained as it may be, cannot succeed alone. It has to work in partnership with the other stakeholders, both inside the company and externally. Yes, C-level support is crucial. It's a must-have. Actually, it's not sufficient, because HR, especially if it's the one leading, and by the way, it's not obvious, because in some companies, innovation and design thinking is led from the CTO side of the company and not from HR. So we can't always assume it will be HR. But if HR is taking up the challenge to lead innovation, to make a value-based change using, amongst other tools, design thinking, it better very quickly create alliances and partnerships within the company, create groupings and champions, because by itself, I can tell you, it's full. Whether it's design thinking or innovation, it's an area full of minefields, full of potential places to fail. And experience is one thing that helps you stop failing, but another thing that helps you is strong partnerships throughout the company. And that's the last point I wanted to make on this issue. Very, very crucial. And again, this is from experience of leading internal innovation for a multinational.
Thank you again, Ellie. And so I'm sure the people listening in would so value some of these comments, because I think the realities for many of our organizations are that we are trying to create and generate innovation. We are trying the models of entrepreneurship, and yet are not very cognizant of some of the tools and the constraints that are in the way of making it happen. So some of what you've experienced and those insights you've brought in, I think, are extremely worthwhile. Now, just with the eye on the time, I guess all I can say now, with 1 minute left, is thank you ever so much. I know this conversation could and should have perhaps gone in for much longer. I'm really hoping that we've shared a few gleams, some insights which would help people. We unfortunately haven't been able to answer all the questions. We've tried to do a bit of justice to some of the comments that came in, but I'm sure all of us are available to be able to, one can reach out to us if there's any question, comment, insight, anything. Because in the world we are in today, nobody knows best. I think it is just sharing of whatever is happening in each of our own kind of universes, that we can enrich each other's lives and experiences, and really bring, the fullness of our experiences to bear. So with that invocation, and with the thanks once again to this fantastic panel and to the audience here and the listeners, I just want to wrap it up and hand it back to you, Kripa. So thank you all ever so much again.
Thank you,
Thank you very
Manoj.
much.
Thank you for
Really
inviting
had
me.
fun.
Thank you indeed.
Thank you so much, Manojit sir. And I would like to thank all the speakers on this panel. Thank you so much for taking out time and being for this discussion today with us. And I would request the audience to please join the next session as it has already begun. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you so
everyone. Thanks for
Thank
Thank you
you.
inviting.
all.
Bye-bye.
And everybody is welcome to connect on LinkedIn if you like. I'm very happy to
Yes.
connect with you all.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.